Okay, I would like to welcome everyone this evening. Quite a few people on the screen I do know. I'm not going to run through the list because it's quite big, but welcome you to Denby Dale's Radio Club. As you can see, we're not quite in the Pie Hall in Denby Dale, but many of us think it's certainly more comfortable place to be without the beer, unfortunately. So I would like to thank Noel G8GTZ very much indeed from the British Amateur Television Club to give us, in fact, you're the first, Noel, of the outside speakers to give us a presentation about amateur television and the club and anything else of interest. There's absolutely no problem whatsoever if this spawns lots of interest from people. We're welcome to have you back, Noel, for a future meeting to do a follow-up on anything that we missed out tonight. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Noel.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick, and good evening all. As Nick said, I'm Noel G8GTZ, a pretty ancient call sign, and one that shows I really haven't got that much interest in the HF bands, I must admit. But my main interests are the VHF, UHF and microwave bands, and I've always, for some reason or other, always been interested in television. So I'm located down south, so I'm in Basingstoke in Hampshire. But if it makes you feel any better, I was actually born in Hebden Bridge. Spent the first 10 years of my life in Grimethorpe. So, I do know the area quite well. What I want to talk to you tonight is about amateur television. We generally find when we go around the clubs and do this talk, there's normally a couple of members that have used to dabble in amateur television when it was on 77s in the old days. And very often people will say, "Oh yeah, I used to do that in the 80s," and you know what I say rings a few bells with people. But what I want to try and get across today is that it's an interesting part of the hobby. It's not quite the black box area, but it is not as difficult as it sounds these days with the way that modern technology has gone. You've got things like the Raspberry Pi, and some of the SDR hardware has got an awful lot of processing and can be used quite simply to do what 20 years ago broadcasters were paying £100,000 to. And I know that because I was actually in that industry. When I was working, I used to sell equipment to Sky and the BBC. So the way the technology has evolved over the last 20 years is amazing. I want to try and keep it fairly local as well, because actually, believe it or not, you live pretty close to a couple of TV repeaters, and there is interest in TV in Yorkshire, and there are several people around that can help you. And in fact, we've got tonight on the chat, we've got K G8NR. Oh Lord, my memory's gone. NRZ. NZR. Thank you. Who actually runs GB3YT over at Murfield. So she's on the chat, and there's a group of people around. So if any of this sort of strikes a bell and you think, oh, I mind having a go at that, yeah, you have got local support. It's not as if you're in the desert. So what I'm going to talk about is what is ATV, what do we mean by that, and talk about analog versus digital. You all know about digital voice and what's happening there. Perhaps you hadn't realised that similar things are happening with amateur television. Talk about the bands that we use in the UK and where the repeaters are. And then I'm going to look at three particular areas, which I've called easy ATV, which are possibly things that you guys could pick up on and even turn into club projects. Receiving your local repeaters has got to be the number one thing to start with, as you have got a couple very local. There's then the opportunity to actually do some pretty interesting stuff up on the hills as and when later this summer, using some of the drone transmitters, which you can buy on eBay for under 20 quid. And then a look at a project that BATC has put together called the Portsdown project. And then I'm going to have one slide at the end to give you a taster for my next talk, as I do believe I'll be coming back to talk to you about Oscar 100, and that'll be a fairly hands-on talk as well. So that should keep us going for probably just under the hour. So what is amateur television? Well, it's a niche area of this wonderful amateur radio hobby that we've got. I always say that you could probably live in the same street as another radio amateur and never actually meet or hardly know you exist, because the hobby covers so much, so many different areas. And, you know, amateur television isn't just about transmitting, although the majority of us actually enjoy the transmitting side of it more than the rest. But there's video production, editing and transmission. But also there are guys in the hobby who do classic camera registration. There's another group of guys who restore OB vans. So there's a group at the moment restoring a 1953 Marconi outside broadcast van. So it's as, you know, it's as wide as you like. There's no real boundaries as to what you can do. You find that a lot of the guys tend to like to make their own stuff, because you can't ring up Martin Lynch in the morning and buy anything really. Although if once you know what you're doing, there is stuff around. And just for completeness sake, when I talk about amateur television, this talk is about fast scan TV, not slow scan as you get on the HF bands. So this is all about fast scan TV. So up to 10 years ago, well, that's probably not quite true. Probably the slide's getting a bit old, but certainly 15 years ago, everything was analog. And those of you who've dabbled in ATV, you probably were doing amateur television, which was analog back in the day. And the bandwidths that we were occupying then were pretty enormous. On 70 SEMS, if you had an ATV guy fairly close to you, he could take up the whole of 70 SEMS with an 8 megahertz AM transmission. But that really faded out really in the 90s because it was pretty unsociable. The band in the 80s, I believe, was 20 megahertz wide. So there was room for everybody, but now we've slimmed down where we've actually got 10 megs, but limited in certain areas. So really there hasn't been any AM on 70 SEMS for the last 20 years. On 23 SEMS and 10 gigs there is, or 23 SEMS being 1.3 gigs, there is still some FM used, but considering the band is 100 megs wide, it's, you know, it's acceptable. So there is still some analog around, but really the majority of it is moving to digital. We've been experimenting with it for about 20 years. As I said, I used to work for a company who made this kit that we used to sell to Sky and the likes. And certain stuff would get dumped in the skip at lunchtime, and by going home time, it was already in the back of my car. So that's how we got going in the early days. And that picture there on the screen is of Roy G8CKM back in 2001. And he was receiving our local repeater down in Winchester when we converted it to digital. So we have been playing around for 20 years, but really it's going more and more digital now. And the reason's really, we were getting squeezed on spectrum. You know, analog TV signals were just too big to be sociable. And also, you know, it was a bit of a new challenge. And so what we did, primarily because the kit is easier, we adopted the broadcast standards. So the standard that is used for satellite, called DVB-S, that's what we've adopted. but we've modified the standards, and we can get much better pictures and also get significantly better gain, RF gain, by going into narrower bandwidths, by going to digital. So really, analog is moving out and digital is coming in. And the difference that makes on a picture, the actual signal bandwidth, these are pictures of a spectrum analyzer, and on the left hand side, you know, that's plus or minus 8 megahertz wide, or 16 megs in total, whereas on the right hand side, that's about 1.5 megs in that particular instance wide. So you can see why Ofcom would smile on this sort of stuff, and it's also more friendly towards other people who want to try and use the bands. But not only do we get that gain, or the reduced bandwidth by going to digital, we also do get some gain. And so these are some pictures I took many years ago, and the screen on the left is a noisy black and white analog picture, and I switched it at exactly same level to digital, and as you can see, that's a perfectly noise-free, what we would call P5 with color. So by going to digital, you know, we have gained quite a bit, and that's the reason why we've done it. And as time has progressed, the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of people experimenting and playing, doing some interesting stuff that now we can achieve some pretty stunning pictures in about 80 kilohertz. So that's an 80 kilohertz, and that's full frame video this guy was transmitting. And as you can see, the resolution, whilst wasn't high definition, was a pretty good standard definition, and that is in 80 kilohertz. So, you know, the potential to go that small is pretty incredible. So that's kind of the story about why we're moving to digital and what's happening in digital. That picture is pretty much state of the art where we are now. But, you know, it's not all digital. And one of the things I want to talk about tonight is the use of the drone transmitters on 5.6 gigs. And that's a picture of G8GTZ, who's a member of the Barrow in Furnace Club, and on a local hilltop. And I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. The other picture on the left-hand side is some Dutch stations that I received on 10 gigahertz when I went down to Dungeness on the south coast, just to prove that you know, 10 gigahertz isn't just around the corner. It does actually go a fair distance in the right conditions. So that sort of, you know, talks about analog and digital and why we've moved towards digital. So if we were to say, well, what is actually happening on the bands, you know, what bands are in use? In the UK, we've actually got 2 new frequency bands. You may have read it's about 4 or 5 years ago now. Ofcom actually gave us an extension to 2 meters. Possibly not many people realise this, but 2 meters does now actually go up to 147. 144 to 147 rather than 146. But it was given by Ofcom. That top 1 megahertz between 146 and 147 was given on the understanding that A, you would need to apply for a special NOV to operate, a special permit to operate, and secondly, you couldn't just go up there and run yet more FM. It had to be something a bit more experimental. So we've taken that on board, and there's quite a bit of TV goes on at 146 megs now. Applying for the permit is easy. You just do it online and you get it straight back, but you do have to have that permit before you can do it. And then a couple of years later, a similar thing happened on 4 meters. 4 meters is now extended from 70 to 72. So the top 1 megahertz, 71 to 72 megahertz, is now available for experimentation. Doesn't just have to be TV, but you you have to be proving that you're doing something a bit more interesting than just normal narrowband work. And there again, that's we've done TV down there, so that's quite interesting. I think the big shock for most of us who are used to the microwave bands is how big the aerials are on 4 meters. We certainly hadn't taken that into account. So they're the bottom bands. The 70 SEMs, I did talk about 70 SEMs earlier, that some of you may have been on 70 SEMs in the 80s. Well, 70 SEMs has now come back into its own with the digital and the reduced bandwidth. We can now operate in 70 SEMs around 437, and we're running bandwidths of about 1 megahertz and causing no trouble to anybody. And that's purely because we've gone digital. 23 SEMs, 1.3 gigs, which has always been an ATV band, and we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. 13 SEMs, 2.3 gigs. We lost a big chunk of that spectrum. Your license was reissued a couple of years ago, and one of the major reissues was we lost 40 megahertz up there, but there is still room for TV. There's another band at 3.4 gigs, which we've got quite a few repeaters in, because we have trouble getting repeaters licensed in the lower bands because of the radar and the CAA and things. 5.6 gigs, I'll come and talk about that. Believe it or not, the higher in frequency you go, generally the easier it becomes, because there's very often consumer electronics equipment you can use up there. 10 gigs or 3 SEMs has always been a TV band, and people have played up there with gun diodes and Solfan heads and had great fun. The real hard band these days is 24 gigs. That's very much for the geeks. And, this is obviously an old slide because I put 120k as a goal up there, but actually I've done 138k on it. So, but that really is geek stuff. So the easy ATV projects, you know, where does this all go and what does it mean to you guys? Well, the 3 projects are to receive your local repeater, another 3 in Yorkshire, spend 20 quid and get on 5.6 gig ATV via eBay, have a look at building a Raspberry Pi based DATV transmit system. And all of these, one club or another around the country has made them the club project. So there's something there for everybody. So your local TV repeaters. Now I'm not sure how good this slide comes out over Zoom, but hopefully you can see where the Humber is. And there are 3 repeaters in Yorkshire. The first one, the big yellow coverage, is GB3EY, which is over at near Hull on the site called South Cove. I meant to look up because there are some other lower band repeaters, voice repeaters based there as well. It's recently been moved there. It's only been on for about 9 months, but it covers a pretty large chunk of East Yorkshire. Then the one we're interested in, and Kay in particular is interested in, is the red one, which is at Murfield, and then GB3TT run by M1ERS down in Sheffield as well. So if we have a look at GB3YT, it's located just south of Murfield. Kay may want to say more about it at the end. And that's got a 23 SEMs or 1.3 gig digital output. And it's also streamed live on the British Amateur Television site. And it covers most of the area, I would think, around Denby Dale. So if we have a look, I don't know how readable that is, Nick, whether that's that shows at all. But it's, you know, out to Wakefield. The actual repeater itself is located, as I say, just south of Murfield. So that gives you an idea of the coverage, and I would think that some of you guys are within that coverage range. GB3EY at South Cove is pretty loud. That's a different map showing the coverage from EY. it kind of runs into the ridge by Doncaster, but you know, it does come over and hits the side of the Pennines, so some of you guys may be able to receive that. Okay, so how do you receive it? Well, it's relatively simple, really. A big block diagram sort of looks something like this. So you have an aerial, and you'll probably need a preamp, possibly. You may even need one of the a satellite booster amp at the bottom, because digital TV receivers are a little bit deaf. So because what we do is we use standard consumer electronics equipment, which are used to having the LNB, the electronics, in front of your satellite dish, and they're very, very high gain amplifiers in there. So we have to kind of compensate that we're not putting that in front of it. But that's the block diagram of how you would receive it. And getting down to practicalities, depending on where you live, probably something like that flat plate bow tie antenna. There are lots of designs for that sort of stuff. If on the web, I just Googled that one this afternoon, and that came up with a design. It literally is what it says. It's a piece of flat plate and then copper wire. For this sort of stuff, I tend to use brake pipe. So Halfords sell brake pipe, reels of brake pipe. You can make this sort of antenna using brake pipe very, very simply. And if you live relatively close to where YT is, you would certainly be able to receive it on that type of antenna. You then probably, unless you're very, very close, you would probably need a preamp. But these days, even that's not difficult. You know, if you go onto eBay and have a look for something like a PGA 103, if you just put PGA 103 into eBay, it'll come up with something like the preamp that's shown there. And then you need to buy yourself a set-top box. You may well have one sitting in the cupboard, but unfortunately Skyboxers won't do. Skyboxers are, the firmware is written so they're tied down so they only ever will receive Sky. But if you look for a free-to-air satellite box, of which there are generally some on Gumtree, but there's certainly are on eBay. I bought that one that's shown there in the picture. I think it cost me 18 quid, and that will tune 23 SEMs, so you don't need any more than that. So rather than connecting it up to the electronics on your dish, you simply feed it with the preamp and the aerial, and you should be able to receive GB3 YT if you're in a reasonable position. So as far as receiving 23 SEMs, or in particular YT, that is a pretty straightforward type of system. I don't know if there's any questions, if anybody's putting anything on the chat. I'm kind of lost where the chat is, actually. But you know, that's sort of phase one. So you know, let's get on board and see if you can receive your local TV repeater. A simple antenna that you can make on your enforced brake. eBay is still working, so you can buy the line amplifier and the preamp and the set-top box. And as I say, if you're in reasonable coverage, you should be able to receive it straight. So the second thing, second project I'm going to talk about is low-cost 5.6 gigs FM. Now, you're probably all aware about the drone market has exploded over the last few years. And one of the things that the drone guys do is they have cameras on board with transmitters that then link back down to the ground. So they basically have got the pilot's view. That's why it's called FPV, first person view. And they bring a camera back, so the pilots or the guys who are flying the remote control can actually have a picture as if they're sitting in the cockpit. Now these are the UK license is 10 milliwatts, but most of them you find on eBay run 600 milliwatts out. So over half a watt, and this is on 5.6 gigs. And you'll pay about 20 quid for them. And the nice thing about them is, and if you can see that line at the bottom, the yellow line at the bottom, that is trying to explain the 5.7 gig amateur radio band. On the far right, there's two big red arrows, and that's the legal channels that the drones can use in the UK. They're supposed to run up at 5.8, but all of the drone, or 90% of the drone transmitters have got a whole load of channels, and then one of the channels also sits right in the middle of a strange piece of the amateur radio band, which is down the bottom on the left-hand side at 5650, that's the frequency. And it just happens that a chunk of the amateur band coincides with one of the standard drone transmitter frequencies somewhere else in the world. And so most of the equipment that's sold over here will actually work on the frequency 5665. And you can legally use that under the terms of your amateur license. You can put big antennas and big power amplifiers. You are actually legally entitled to run 400 watts in that band. And so it makes an ideal basis for having a cheap amateur television transmitter. And I haven't looked recently, but certainly a couple of years ago, you could get a transmitter and a receiver for £20, and they just work out of the box. You can either use them for voice, or you can use them for video. So all you need to do is wire up power and some video and some audio, connect an antenna, and you're away. So for the video and the audio, you can use an old camcorder. You have either got in your shack or in the cupboard under the stairs, I'll bet, an old camcorder with the yellow phono sockets on the side. Those yellow phono sockets, these drone transmitters come complete with phono leads with yellow, red and white plugs on them, and they will plug directly into your camcorder, and that will give you your video and your audio that you need to transmit. On receive, you just need a video monitor, and you can buy those on eBay, or a lot of old tellies have got the SCART input. So anything with a SCART input can be used to act as a receiver. Aerials, well, your best source used to be, until 3 weeks ago, was the local tip, because actually you can use a sky dish for this. You can take an old sky dish, which is a picture on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, and you can hang a piece of wire in front of it, cut to length, and that will work incredibly well. That sky dish there was my first system, and I think I paid £2 for that sky dish from the local tip. Obviously, you've got a transmitter and a receiver, so you really need to be able to work out either you run 2 dishes or you need a changeover relay, and that's probably the most expensive bit because you need a decent changeover relay. So we would suggest that you use 2 antennas, one on transmit and one on receive, and that's what the picture at the top there is. Somebody's got an old lighting stand, so one of the things you can buy to put these work lights on, and he's got two flat plate antennas, one with the transmitter on and one on the receiver on. And I don't know how well you can see it, but if you look carefully, there's two black boxes at the back of the panel antennas, and that's the transmitter and the receiver. And that's it. He just uses it just like that. So it really is very, very simple to get going on 5.6 gigahertz television, believe it or not. And, you know, your work paths, line of sight paths, 25K is easy. And the reason why I put G8GTZ in there, because a couple of years ago we had an inquiry from the Barrow in Furness Radio Club. They hadn't done any telly, they'd never done anything like this in the past, never done microwaves, never done telly, but they were interested in this as a club project. And actually they had great fun for a couple of years. They worked the guys, you know, they took it to extreme and worked the guys over in Northern Ireland, and they really had great fun. They, as you can see, he's in the top corner there, he's got his old Sky dish, and, you know, it was a great learning exercise for the club. There was also an article there again, I think it was a couple of years ago, called PW Siren. And that used exactly the same equipment, but all they did was just connect a microphone to the transmitter and a loudspeaker on the receiver, and used it purely for voice. So, and I've actually worked people in contests on 5.6 gigs, 60 or 70 kilometers, just using this for voice. So, you know, it really is great fun. The other picture I think is M0SKM down at Dunstable, and a couple of pictures along the bottom. You can, you know, once you've built the basic gear, of course you can always improve it. And there were some big power amplifiers on eBay as well. I think that was a 5-watt power amplifier in the middle, and yeah, that was great fun. So, you know, there's something just to, you know, to prove that ATV is not you don't have to be a real geek to do it. It's easily accessible, it's not expensive, but you can have great fun, particularly where you guys are situated. You've got loads of high spots to work some easy paths. Down here we struggle to find anything above about 300 feet, or, you know, anything at 200 meters is a mountain down here, so it's harder. But where you guys are, there's some great paths you can work. And as I say, there are several guys around who will be more than willing to give you a hand if you got involved in this. I know several of the guys, Gary M1EGI, is it? And the Finningley Radio Club particularly are very keen on this sort of stuff. So there's two easy club projects. That's you know, you've got how to receive your local repeater, and then the 5.6 gig playing around with this stuff, and of course it will work across the shack if you're not allowed to go out at the moment. And then the next question is, well, how do I transmit this digital stuff? No, it's not. The next question is just one slide talking about something else we've done in the amateur TV world. What we found on these lower bands that we got, 71 and 146, there wasn't room for the normal TV stuff we were doing. So we had to invent something different. And so we came up with the phrase reduced bandwidth, or RBTV, and that means it's very, very narrow. And so we can now operate in bandwidths down to 100 kilohertz or less, and get real good live pictures, you know, in those sorts of bandwidths. It's all still based on the standards that we talked about earlier, but unfortunately, normal satellite receivers and the like won't work anymore. So we had to develop some other products. So we developed our own receiver, and the BATC sells the parts, the PCB and the tuner and bits and pieces that you see there to enable people to build a tuner. But we've also developed a transmitter system. Now, I mean, that sounds pretty horrendous, to develop a digital transmit system. But as I said earlier, with the advent of the Raspberry Pis and the Lime SDRs and Adam Plutos, the SDR hardware, it's a lot more achievable than you think. And so a couple of years ago, we banged our heads together and decided we needed to do something that would be accessible to everybody and make it easy for everybody to go to digital TV. And we came up with the Portsdown project. And the Portsdown project is based around a Raspberry Pi 3. It uses a Lime SDR Mini, and you can put it all together. You don't have to do any soldering. We even sell a pre-programmed SD card, so you can literally buy the Raspberry Pi, buy the SD card, buy the Lime, and just put them all together, and it works. The great thing is that it requires a bit of hands-on construction, and that one in the picture there is just one I grabbed off, a picture I grabbed off our members forum today. And, you know, people have just taken this project and driven it into sort of places where we never thought. You know, it is real hands-on radio stuff, and it's great stuff. But if you don't want to get involved in that, you can just use it as it comes. And what this gives you is a digital TV transmitter, which covers from 70 megahertz all the way up to 3.4 gigahertz. So it covers all of the amateur bands that I've been talking about. And it does that because we're using the Lime SDR hardware, which you can buy and don't have to do any RF engineering. So, you know, it's an easy way to get on air at relatively low cost. For the technical amongst you, that's the block diagram of it. Essentially, it's a 3B Raspberry Pi 3 with a touch screen. We've either got a 7-inch or a 3.5-inch touch screen. To capture devices which are down the left-hand side, we can capture using a webcam, or we can capture using a thing called an EasyCap, which allows you to use your camcorder with it. And then there's a sound USB dongle. But all of those blue blocks on that side are just standard product you can buy off eBay. And we can also use the Pi camera. In the middle is the Raspberry Pi, as I say, and a touch screen, either a 7-inch or a 3.5-inch. And then on the right-hand side are all the output bits. So we go out into the Lime SDR Mini, which is the radio block, and we've done various switches and PTT decoders and stuff. So you can build a system which is as complex or as simple as you like. So in picture terms, this shows the block diagram on, or the diagram on the right hand side shows a Raspberry Pi 3. We have developed one card which is a breakout card. So to save you having to solder onto that 40-pin header and risk blowing up your Raspberry Pi, we've done a breakout board which can give you screw terminals or push terminals. So all of your connections are made via that PCB rather than to the actual Raspberry Pi. So on the left-hand side of the diagram, you've got the Pi cam. That's the input, and then on the right-hand side, it shows the Lime SDR Mini, which just plugs in at USB, and the card below that is the PTT control, and below that is below in the middle is the screen. So the basic system is a Raspberry Pi 3 with the Lime SDR Mini and the touchscreen. You can buy the pre-programmed SD card from the BATC shop, and all of the other hard to get or critical components we sell in the shop as well. We don't sell resistors and capacitors and transistors. Anything you can buy off eBay, we don't sell, because every time somebody puts an order in means I have to pack something up and trot off down to the post office and put it in an envelope and post it. So we're not there to do that, but what we are there to do is to help people get on board, and we sell the hard and difficult to get bits. So this was launched in 2017, so about 3 years ago now, and we've sold bits to over 500 users around the world, and they're all building something. We're not sure quite what, because everyone is different, and there's probably somebody near you. I should have zoomed in on Yorkshire actually, because I know there's lots of builders in Yorkshire. In fact, I know Kay, who's on the chat, is building one. It's all fully documented, and we've got a whole load of help pages, and we have an active members forum where people can ask the difficult or the dumb questions. Now, there was I don't know if you guys watched the TX Factor videos as a club. This was actually featured on TX Factor 15, which is a couple of years ago. There was a whole program on the Portsdown, and it also appeared in Ragcom in June 2017 as well. So that's, you know, I've really talked about the three things: receiving a local repeater, or trying out the cheap and cheerful 5.6 gig stuff, or getting more complex, the digital TV transmitter. You know, but as I said earlier, that's not all that ATVers are involved in. You know, we do video production. We go out and do filming of things like the AMSAC conference. We generally go to the RSGB conference and do one of the recordings or the transmission over the internet of the AMSAC stream at the RSGB convention. Or there are guys who are doing, as I say, restoring OB vans and historic cameras and all sorts of things. You know, ATV is very, very broad. And we did have, until it went wrong, when Tim Peake was up on the space station, we were heavily involved in receiving his pictures and putting them out to the schools. You may remember he did the schools contacts. And in fact, I was personally involved in that project, and we came up to Otley, and we did I think it was Otley Junior School, and we received live pictures of Tim Peake on the ISS, and put them out at the school at Otley. So you know, it's a very, very broad church. And just recently, there's been even another angle of TV. Because now that the satellite has gone up, it's the very first geostationary, i.e. you don't have to waggle yargies around to find it, satellite. And there's a TV channel up there, which we can use to transmit. There's 8 megahertz of bandwidth, which is dedicated for TV use. And, you know, that's opened up all sorts of things we can do. But I think if this one goes down well, Nick is intending that I'll come back and talk about Oscar 100. And that won't just be TV. I'll be talking about narrowband and how easy it is to receive that as well. So more of that one next time. So, you know, TV really is on the up. It's interesting. We've seen a 25% increase in members over the last 3 years. A lot of areas in the hobby are seeing a decline, but we in the British Amateur Television Club are really seeing a growth. I think it was largely due to this idea of the Portsdown and the Raspberry Pi, and it's something you can put together and you can do and you can play with. So that's pretty much all I've got to say. There's lots of information on the web. There's these links do work on the presentation, so actually I could just open up. We've got well, I thought it would. Oh, yes, it did. So the BATC website, I'm not sure if you're seeing that. I presume you are. BATC website is there. There's a lot more information about the BATC there, but we've also got a wiki, which is where you can get a lot more information. If we would have a look at the 5.6 gig equipment, whole load more information on how to get going on 5.6 gigs. A lot of what I've said tonight is there, but with a lot more detail. So that's all there. There's sections on the satellite, how to get started on the satellite, which I'll be talking about next time. But and then the Portsdown system, which I was talking about. Lots and lots of information on the BATC wiki. So I think that pretty much brings me to an end, Nick. So if I just stop sharing my screen, and then we can, I see there's been lots of questions. Right.
Okay, brilliant. Well, Noel, I'd like to, before we go to questions, just thank you very much. It was a really interesting presentation, and I can say now that we will all be interested in what you've got to say about Oscar 100 as well. So I'm going to chuck it out. So if anyone's got a question or a point they'd like to make, over to you, really. You can unmute yourself. If you've got your video camera on, wave at me and I'll unmute you, but you can do it yourself. If you haven't got a video camera on and you want to ask a question, you can just put your hand up. There's a little button that you'll see down the bottom of the screen that's on the top if you're on a smartphone or iPad, and you can just hit the hand up and I'll move over to you. So right, who's first?
I'll put the thumbs up. Will that do?
That's very good. Okay, Gerald first, and then we've got Darren, and I think we've got Brian as well. So Gerald, over to you.
Yeah, keep it quiet. Well, thanks again for that talk. It was really interesting, and we've joined as a club to the BATC for the club. So does that mean all the members can log in and look at the wiki and things like that?
Mm-hmm. The wiki is available to everybody. So the only things that you need to log into the members' website for are to buy things from the shop, and also to download the very latest magazine. But we don't mind if you as a club logs in, downloads the PDF and then passes it around amongst the members. We're quite happy for you to do that.
That's okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And presumably if anybody wants to order anything from the shop, they could let me know, because I'm the one who set it up, and I can order it for them. Is that right?
Yes, although we would ask, if it gets too much, we'd ask people, it's only £8 to join themselves. So if they become really interested and want to buy a load of stuff, we'd prefer you do it that way. But no, for the first one, absolutely, no problem at all.
It's just to get them going. Right, back to Nick.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Gerald. Darren, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's okay. I was only testing the system, to be honest. I saw the thumbs up sign and clicked on it and then unclicked on it. I can hear him laughing now. But a very interesting talk, and it's nice to see it. Everything is very much open source as well, open to everybody. So thanks for setting it up and thanks for giving the talk. Back to you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, all of the code for the Portsdown, the Raspberry Pi code is on GitHub. There's nothing closed about it. It's all available. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Darren, and thank you, Noel. Right. Anyone else with a question? Yeah, Roger.
Roger hasn't unmuted his microphone.
There you go. Sorry. Thanks, Noel. Yeah, very interesting.
Brilliant,
I wonder. I know you talked about the bandwidth in terms of megahertz and things. What
this
sort
is
of
the future of club meetings.
Signal need to actually, in comparison to the, like obviously a Raspberry Pi, it's relatively low power and relatively low computing power. But I just wonder what bandwidth it needs in terms of, megabits per second kind of territory in terms of digital signals you're sending.
Right. So Raspberry Pi actually, surprisingly, has got quite a lot of. It isn't bad. The reason why it's good for us is because there is actually an onboard hardware encoder, video encoder, an H.264 video encoder. So the processing power required isn't that enormous, and we can get up to about 4 mega symbols video rate out of it. So it's more than adequate for the amateur transmissions that we do. Yeah. And the quality is surprisingly good, particularly when used with the Pi camera, because the Pi camera has got a digital interface directly into the encoder. So the actual picture quality we can get out of a Raspberry Pi is pretty surprising.
I'm just interested. Thank you.
Sorry?
I was interested. Thank you. Gerald's got a picture of one. Look, his big one. You've got a big one, Gerald.
Thank you. Yeah, I just found Dennis gave the club a full Maplin kit with the Raspberry Pi in and the book and everything. So,
right.
if anybody wants to have a go,
there we go. Keep the box. Keep the box. That'll be worth something if it's a Maplin box.
Exactly. Thank you. Back to you, Nick.
David, over to you. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Noel. That was really good. You talking about receiving on 23 cents, so we can receive our local repeater that Kay manages. I've got a free-to-air satellite system in the loft that we used to use in the caravan. So I've got the dish, the LNB, and the receiver. So all I need to, and I reckon, I don't know exactly where the repeater is, but from Murfield, I only live about 2 miles from Murfield. So I should imagine that if I just put this dish on the top of my mast, point it at the right place, I won't need anything else at all to receive.
No, that's right. I mean, to be clear, the receiver box is absolutely fine. You won't need the LNB, the electronics on the dish, because what the electronics on the dish does, it converts the signal, the satellite signal, down from 10 gigahertz down to the signal, the 1500 meg signal, which the satellite receiver can receive. So you don't need the LNB bit. You just literally take the satellite receiver, and if you're that far away, you probably be able to receive it without even a preamp on it. But be careful, because the satellite receiver will have 12 volts on the aerial socket. So, and it's always a bit of a challenge to go into the menus on these satellite receivers, because they're all different. And somewhere you will be able to A, turn off the 12 volts, and B, scan for a new signal. But I think Kay has already just put up on the chat there that receiving on a standard box is detailed.
That's
so
right.
You're cracking. You're 3/4 of the way there.
Okay, because I don't do anything with microwaves at all at the moment, but just being able to receive on 23 cents would, is a big step forward.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Right, anyone else got a question they want to ask?
G0 BFJ.
Yeah, Brian, over to you.
Yes, okay, thanks a lot. I wonder, do you have or experience any interference on 5 gigs? We use 5 gigs for the AC contests, and we're experiencing interference from what we think is Wi-Fi, internet connections or whatever, and getting us way round the side of those is quite difficult. So I wondered if you're experiencing any difficulty on 5 gigs.
Yeah, yes, it's one of the bands that they're really promoting for, particularly long haul Wi-Fi, and it's only going to get worse. Than there's not much we can do about it, unfortunately. It's the fact that we share it with the Wi-Fi, or the it's not really Wi-Fi at that, because it's used for rural broadband. It tends to get used for rural broadband, and so it makes it worse, because we go out on on hilltops, and that's exactly the place where they're putting these links in. But I'm afraid it is just becoming a fact of life. And yes, there's if you look on the UK microwave reflector, people have moaned about it in the past. I'm not sure that there's much we can do. It's just spectrum is becoming rarer and rarer. So yeah.
Yes, okay. We're finding this. We've been trying to transmit from Home Moss. You'll know where Home Moss is. Everybody knows that. Yeah. And the carriers there are on 4 different frequencies and very, very strong. So we've been having problems there. But there we go. That's just, I wondered whether it was just us or whatever, you know.
No, I'm afraid not. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, good.
Nick,
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Who else have we got? Anyone else with a question?
Yeah, could I just
yeah,
ask?
Richard.
On my mic. There we are. Years ago, you could buy satellite receivers with a baseband output, and if you connected to the baseband to a shortwave receiver, you could actually listen to the audio, and you could pick up a certain flying machine live video from that usually lands near Wakefield.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you utilise that baseband output, or with any receivers with baseband output these days?
Unfortunately, it's really, I mean, that was in the analog days. First of all, those downlinks don't tend to use analog anyway.
No, that's right.
They've gone, I think they've gone up to 5.5 gigs digital, and they're encrypted.
Yeah.
That sort of fun has disappeared. As I say, there is a little bit of analog still around, but less and less so within the amateur world. So it's more and more digital. But yeah, if you've got an analog box, you can still play around with it. You know, it's still legal to use it, but yeah, there's less and less analog around these days.
Yeah. No, fair enough. You know, when you said you worked in the satellite industry making boxes, etc., was it at Shipley?
No, but I know Pace. No, I worked down in Southampton. We were on the other end. Pace made all the set-top boxes, which you can use in your home. We made the bits that Sky and the BBC buy to transmit the stuff.
Right.
I did go up to Shipley quite a few times because we used to work with Pace in the early days. So, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Someone had their thumbs up. Was it David?
Nick, can I just ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just following on from what he was saying, Brian was saying, and Noel's replying. I thought the 5 gigs band, one of the picture you showed, is really a wide band. Won't there be any gaps in it anywhere that we could move to that would be better?
Yeah, it's very complicated. Surprisingly, the 5 gig band is. I've got a picture here. If I can, as soon as you ask the question, hang on, how do I share my screen again? That one. So you can see that, yeah? Yeah. So the 5 gig band is bizarre. It's in 3 chunks. So this is these 3 green blocks here. There's a green block there, there's another green block there, and there's another green block here. And that's actually the amateur band. It's in three different splits. Now, the narrow band bit that we use for contests is this chunk here. So the actual calling frequency on narrowband is 5760. And unfortunately, that coincides with some of the frequencies that we're talking about. And is actually, the reason why we use it is because that's the common piece that is across Europe. That's a region 1 allocation. There's 2 other chunks, one at the top end, where there's the 2 red arrows, and is also shared with all of the unlicensed stuff. So the drones are in there and all the domestic Wi-Fi is in there. So it's a pretty horrible chunk of spectrum. But the piece we've been talking about tonight is this one down on the left-hand side, where there doesn't seem to be much else happens. So it's a pretty clean piece of spectrum, and also the drones transmitters can go in there. So it's a complicated picture, but the narrowband segment is there because everywhere else in Europe uses that bit.
Thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You asked my question, Gerald. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. Right, anyone else for a question to Noel? No, everyone happy? I noticed in the chat, Kay, who hasn't got audio tonight, has put various bits of information up there. In particular, I can see, Kay, you've said the GB3YT website has got various bits and pieces that would help David set up his sat box to receive the output from the repeater. So thanks very much indeed, Kay, for those bits of information you've posted up on the chat.
Yeah, I also see Graham G8GTZ's come up. He's the other keeper of it as well. So,
okay.
And the other piece of information that's there, ATVers tend to use 144.750 for talkback. So FM, because we're old-fashioned. So 144.750 is where you can talk to the ATVers. And there are quite a few around in Sheffield, so in Yorkshire. So yeah. Sorry, Nick.
No, that's okay. No. David, for you, Graham G8POK has just said that the repeater is located near to HD50PH. So that's pretty obvious. You can see it. Yeah, I thought you'd have spotted it. Right. Anyone got any final questions to Noel before we call it a night? I can't see anyone's dying to get in which case, can I, Noel, thank you very much indeed for what was a really interesting talk this evening. I think everyone enjoyed it, and I'm pretty sure we all got a lot from it. I'm not alone, I don't think, in saying that I've never tried out amateur TV, receiving or transmitting, but I can certainly pick up VHF without any problem from Murfield. So I guess I'm within range for the repeater there, and a bit like David, somewhere around I've got an old free-to-air sat box that's lying in a cupboard somewhere, and we'll see if we can have a play with that in an area or two to receive it. So Noel, thanks very much indeed. I will get back to you in terms of looking for a date for your Oscar 100 presentation.
Okay.
I was saying to one of our members earlier on this evening, Darren, who's I think logged out now, but I was saying to him that, you know, in all likelihood, the lockdown that we're facing in the UK is going to go on for a good, 4 to 6 weeks from now, sadly, but it's likely to be necessary. And I believe, reading between what's being said, that even when it's lifted, that there will still be restrictions on daily life that will apply to us. And I suspect that meetings of clubs and groups involving groups of people are going to be one of those that will be one of the last things that will happen. So I think we'll continue with this format for some time. And Noel, out of interest, because various people have suggested it, we're quite keen, I think, as a club, when and if we get back to normal life in the UK, that we want to see if we can run mixed mode meetings. So run our meetings in person, and alongside it have a link like this available, which club members can see in the fixed meeting, but outside people can see presentations. And it would also enable us to bring in someone like you, Noel, who, you're very unlikely, I suspect, to be dedicated enough to drive up on a Wednesday night from where you live up to Denby Dale to give us a talk and then disappear back home again afterwards.
Yeah, I know the Norwich Club do a lot of talks by Skype. They get people in on Skype.
Yeah. So certainly, I think given how well received this has been as a mode, then we'll definitely use that for the future. So I'm quite sure now, even after you've given us 2 talks in this period, we'll be coming back to you, and people, if they've been playing in the meantime, and if people in the club are interested in one of the projects that you were talking about there, we'd have probably lots of questions to pose to you. So Noel, back to you for final kind of over from you really on what you'd like to say to us.
No, that's brilliant. Yeah, well done. Thanks for the interest. That's what I'd really say, and it's great to be able to talk to talk to guys. And yeah, this is a great tool to talk to people around the country, isn't it? I will let you have a PDF of the slides. I'll email you a PDF of the slides. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you again. As I say, another one in the can, which is Oscar 100. So that's yeah, that's good. That's a hot topic, and everybody can play that, because you doesn't matter if you live in the bottom of the Dale, you can receive that. So lots of fun to be had there. Good.
Okay, thank you. Now, Gerald, do you want to find a word before we call it a night?
Can I just throw a quick one in?
Hang on, Richard.
Quick, Richard.
Yeah, go on, Gerald. Go on.
My apologies for the picture going all over the place. I've got to ask Noel something. Do you ever use blue tack for keeping your cameras sturdy? Because I definitely need one.
It is one of the big battles, isn't it? I mean, we yeah, there's a bit of a joke going around that we are the British Amateur Television Transmitting Club, because none of us really worry about the video quality or production values these days. And yes, camera wobble is something you just live with.
Right, thanks. Yeah, just echo what Nick said, though. Thank you, Noel. Much appreciated. And there is a little clap button under the reactions at the bottom of the screen, guys. So if you want to just click on the clap button, and we'll say thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Where's that?
How about that then?
Are you going to do the raffle, Gerald?
Well, I'm just working out a way of doing it. It's distributing the tickets. I haven't solved yet.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much, Noel.
Thank you, and take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night.
Yeah.
I've just looked at my raffle ticket and I've won. No.
Cheers,
there is the problem of getting the bottle of wine from Gerald to you, David. So
yeah, I can wait. I can wait.
Anyway, look, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting. It's been a really good night, and look forward to next week. If I remember rightly, we've got Eric Huth, 4Z1UG next week. If anyone has not listened to Eric, you'll find him on the QSO Today podcast. If you look, just Google it on your computer, you'll find it up there. He has got a very, very extensive range of speakers that he invites to his podcast. So I think he'll make a very interesting contribution. Okay, thank you very much. Good night, 73s to everyone.
See you later.
Thank you very much.